And hello, everyone. You are watching Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Really excited about our next segment we're about to go live with on Amazon Live. Author Wendy Sanford is joining us today. She's celebrating her brand new book that is literally out at the time we're having this conversation today. The book is called These Walls Between Us. I'm going to show you the beautiful cover there. We're going to talk to Wendy not only about the writing of the book, but also what it's been like for her to share her own family, her own friendship, but also have an important conversation when it comes to race as well. And it's a really fascinating look at not only, I think, Miss Sanford's life, but also the world that we live in today. If you're just now hearing about the book, of course, we want you guys to be able to get your own copy of it. So I want to remind you how you can do that. And we're excited now to bring in our Amazon Live family here for Cyrus Ware Presents. Glad you all could join us, as well as us tuning in on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. I am your host, Cyrus Webb, and I'm excited to welcome Miss Wendy Sanford to our program today. Today is Pub Day for her brand new book called These Walls Between Us, a memoir of friendship across race and class. We want to talk to Ms. Sanford not only about the writing of the book, but also what it was like for her to be able to share her own journey with the world. Ms. Sanford, thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I've really been looking forward to it.
Well, I have to say, I was sharing with you when our friend Anne Marie first told me about this book. I was fascinated by it because I think, for one thing, these are such important conversations. But I also have to say, I was excited for you to be able to share this slice of your life with the rest of us. So, how does it feel now, literally, to be on publication day, to now have your book available for the world to read?
Well, as you know, the book was kind of co-created by Mary Norman, my long time friend, uh, who's a Black woman, and she texted me this morning and said, "I'm even feeling nervous." So we went back and forth a bit, and we decided to have a glass of wine later tonight after the launch is done, um,
Right.
via Zoom. But the nervousness is, as she put it so well, we have been private people, and now a few readers, maybe more than a few, will know something about us, and we aren't so private anymore. So it's awesome. And we did it really to try to be of use, to 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 put out what I learned from this friendship as a white woman about American society and the obstacles that were in me to friendship with Mary, uh, and to see if that could be useful, particularly to other white readers who are interested in uh, learning the obstacles within them and creating interracial friendships or doing better in interracial friendships. Then they may not even know they are doing so well, but you begin to realize, oh, that I just said something that could really have been hurtful, or I just did something that implied that my friend was lesser than I am, or all those things that white people learn that just seem to come naturally to us. We really have to unlearn them, and so that's why we put the book out. But we're nervous.
Miss Sanford, you bring up an interesting question, and excuse me for calling you Miss Sanford. I'm from Mississippi, so it's that Southern hospitality and that trying to make sure I'm showing respect. Does it surprise you? I guess because I was raised most of my life in the South, but I have to say race was not a big part of the conversation in my house. But does it surprise you that in 2021, especially now that people are able to read this book, that we're still having some of the same conversations about race and class?
Yes. Well, I would say it doesn't surprise me. There have been so many patterns that I'm writing about patterns, in the previous century that you can look around and see happening today. As Mary Norman said to me, uh, uh, the former president, whose name I won't mention, wanted to go back to the good old days. And she said, this book will show people what the good old days were really like. There's a lot of nostalgia for how things used to be, and things weren't so great in terms of race and class back then and today. And you have the murders of so many African American men and women and children, really, by police officers. You have the return of all those refugees from Haiti, just a really abrupt and cruel, to me, return. So what is it that we still need to understand as a country that says we believe in equality?
You are very transparent in this book, Miss Sanford, and some may say surprisingly so. Was it a surprise for you how candid you were, not only just about the conversation about race and privilege, but about yourself and your own feelings about privilege growing up?
That's such an interesting question, Mr. Webb. Um, I I'll do you the same honor. um, I I think that's really white people need to do this. I'm just going to read you the quote from a mentor of mine, Reverend James Lawson, a leader, African American leader in the civil rights movement. He once said, "Unless the white community breaks its silence and determines that race is not a peripheral issue, but an issue central to the things we say we are valuable to America, the finest movement in the world will not cause racism to cease." So I just felt like, as a white woman, that's what I could do, was be as transparent as I could about the ways I fell down, the ways I picked myself up, and all the authors who helped me learn without my having to go to a black friend to ask something that they shouldn't have to tell me about.
You said this in chapter 14 of the book, and I'm reading from the Kindle edition, everyone, but I'll have it highlighted now in the carousel on Amazon Live. But you'll notice next to it, you will see the print edition as well. But you said this, and this is one thing that I made a note of because I definitely wanted to talk to you about it,
Oh,
Ms. Sanford. You
good.
said, "My dependence on family wealth is profound. I count on having ample food, shelter, and health care, a new car when the old one wears out, even for vacation travel. Like many people coddled by affluence, I didn't trust that I could survive without that cushion. Never having to test my own resourcefulness, I doubt my ability to support myself on my own. This fear is part of being upper class. Fear of not having the cushion we count on, fear of not being capable. The fear makes us condone shady behaviors, making us obedient." And when I first read that, I thought that is such it, for one, it's a very bold thing to, to be able to admit to oneself,
Mm.
but then to be able to share that with the world. What was that like for you to get to that revelation for yourself?
I guess I would say it took a lot of self-honesty, uh, without self-flagellation, if you know what I mean. Not blaming myself, but trying to understand better and better the training I got in what I was supposed to do and be and think as a white upper middle class person. And as I revisit the memories in this book, I revisit them with new eyes, and from the reading and learning that I've done as a feminist, uh, uh, and just as a thinker, I revisit those memories and I see things I didn't understand at the time. And that paragraph is an example of really feeling like, how many white people or how many affluent people really talk like that? And that was what I could do, was just be as transparent as I could about what I perceived, without uh, being guilty about it, just being honest about it.
I love that, and I love that distinction too. Because one thing that frustrates me to see that I've even talked to my friends about this, if you didn't do something, there's no reason for you to be guilty. I feel like, to beat yourself up for something you had no control over. I don't think it's helpful,
Yeah.
but I think that the recognition that there is a distinction being made, I think that's a totally different thing. And I love that you bring up that point. Hello to you, Freddie, on the Amazon Live side. Appreciate you. Freddie says God's love. Definitely, I think the big thing about this book, Freddie, and I want to say for those who else are tuning in there, I see you guys over there on YouTube and Facebook, as well as our friends there on LinkedIn as well. We have our friends at LinkedIn too. You all are watching Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm excited to welcome Ms. Wendy Sanford to our program today. We're talking with her about her new book, These Walls Between Us, a memoir of friendship across race and class. So you mentioned Mary, and I wanted to talk about how the friendship kind of began. And it's interesting. That's one of the things that, again, that intrigued me when Anne Marie told me about the book was that, I mean, this is a friendship that has continued. So I guess an obvious question would be, talk to us about the connection. Talk about the connection you have with Mary and why you believe that friendship has continued.
Oh, thanks for asking that question. Well, we met when I was 12 and she was 15. She had just arrived to be what was called at the time a summer helper for my mother for a month during my mother and family's summer vacation. She came all the way from rural Western Virginia to do this. At a time the year after Emmett Till had been brutally murdered. So she came by herself with some help from aunts in New Jersey, et cetera, to come a really long way to have her first away job as essentially a domestic worker. She was 15 years old, but she did all the hard work in my family. So I was very close to her in age, and she was focused on me because that was part of her job, was to know all about me. And my job as a young, white, affluent girl was not to know anything about her. But you have a little curiosity, and we were friendly for a long time. We weren't friends. And she came back each summer. My mother would beg her to come back, and she would come even though it was terribly lonely for her out on this in this New England beach. But she would come, and we would be friendly. And then I'll tell you when we started to become friends. There came a summer in our 40s when we were both divorced. We were both single parents. She was working in corrections as the first female officer in the Mercer County Corrections System. And I was a feminist. I'd been writing about women's health, and I was a feminist activist. And we were both really lonely out there on that beach. I was becoming a lesbian. My parents didn't know it. So I was not really being my full self. As you probably know, part of being a domestic worker is being not your full self. So it was very lonely for us both out there. And we started walking the beach at night because that was the only place. She wasn't allowed on the beach except in uniform and serving white employers in the daytime. So we would walk and talk about our lives. And that's when we started moving from being friendly to being friends. And that was 35 years ago, 35, 40 years ago. And we just continued, as Mary said the other day, I was curious. I started learning everything I could from books about how she might have grown up. I mean, we talked also, but I didn't want to lean on her for the information. And so I just read everything I could get my hands on. And then we started visiting each other's homes. And she was at my wedding to my spouse, Polly. And we have visited back and forth a lot. And during the pandemic, of course, we can't visit each other. And she's 80 now, and I'm 77. And we talk on the phone at least weekly, and we text a lot. It's a great way to be in contact. And we're both pretty progressive politically. So we rant and rave about the latest right-wing episode.
I love the fact that you talk about that friendship. And I think the friendship is such a big part of this. But the book is also, and again, this is something I did not expect because, again, and even as the title kind of alludes to, and I'm curious as to, yeah, that's why I told you I love the title. Because to me, the title was so much more than about race and class. It really was about identity. It really is about breaking down the barriers even within yourself. Did you go into the title with those layers in mind?
I actually was praying on it because we had a title we liked that just didn't really say what the book was about. So I had to get a new title. And I just walked and prayed on it. And These Walls Between Us came up to me, and I tested it, and it seemed good. And it goes back now, I realized, to a story in the book that I won't take a long time telling, but there was this moment when I came from being to the summer cottage, walked along the back of the house, and in the dining room, my mother was having lunch that Mary had just made her. And in the kitchen, Mary was having lunch, and they were back to back to the same wall, but
Yeah.
one was in the dining room and one was in the kitchen. And that said so much. Much of that I didn't understand at the time, but as I go back to it, I realize how many of the rules about domestic workers, you can't sit in your employer's presence. Uh, the white employers tend to say, "Oh, she's like one of the family," but they don't eat together. And they were, and how alone each was on opposite sides of the wall. But they were chatting. That's the thing. They were chatting. So it's a complex picture, and that's the picture in my mind when I picture the walls between us.
Well, I tell you, I think there's so many, I mean, great references in the book that that title alludes to. I also
Tell
like the
me.
fact, well, one of the ones that stand out to me as we talk about Mary is the difference. That's one of the things you talk about in the book is the passing of the GI Bill, but how Mary's own family was excluded from that.
Yes.
Even though they had gone, just like the other soldiers to fight, there was that barrier between them in how they were treated and looked at. I think too it says something to the
Mhm.
reader as well, Ms. Sanford, and I think, and that is looking at the walls that are between us today. Not just I think when we're talking about race and issues of class, but I think there is such a misunderstanding of each other today.
Mm.
Do you
Mm.
find that with Mary that that friendship helped you to better understand not just yourself but also the world that the two of you lived in?
Yes, I think so. I think that if you grow up white and fairly affluent and well off, and you can have a pretty rosy picture of the world. And as I understood Mary's life better, and so appreciated her agency and the way she moved in the world and got the work she needed and did have really humane work and corrections. But I understood and I saw the health differences between us, and began reading and learning that the stress of racism actually ages a person's body. That's one of the theories. And so uh, I began to understand the world better, uh, and more realistically, I think.
You also say, and this was something, and I think I get this again living in Mississippi, where people, I literally had someone to say to me because I was when I was getting ready to travel, they said, "You all have an airport there?" I mean, they were. It was a serious question.
Mhm.
They really didn't know that we had at an airport. I bring that up because of something that you said in the book, and it kind of deals with again with marrying you and the times. You said this. Let me see. I didn't mark the chapter here to see what it's chapter number 13. But you said this about yourself and what you've learned. You said for decades I failed to register or analyze the wealth gap between Mary and me. I accepted as a given that most Black people lived in tired wooden homes like the ones along with Mother's Witherspoon Street shortcut. This is one of the ways that white supremacy works. I, an educated, and you have that in quotes, person, remain ignorant of all the ways the class difference between Mary and me have been socially constructed over 300 years, from enslavement to sharecropping, from Jim Crow to restrictive housing policies. And when you say it that way, Ms. Sanford, it really shows that it truly is what the word says, systematic. What
Exactly.
conversations what conversations do you hope come from passages like that in the book? Your own real life observations. What do you hope we take away from that as readers?
I hope Thanks for asking that. I have so many hopes for the book, of course. I hope that readers will be drawn into the story because I tell it through scenes and conversation and moments. It's not a didactic book at all. It's really a very personal story, and with a lot about Mary's life also that she's told me and contributed to the book. And I hope that those moments of reflection, like the one you just read, which delighted me that you read it, I hope those moments of reflection will feed into the reader's own moments of reflection. And that I'm hoping book groups might read the book and compare, readers can compare notes, and maybe I'll learn from one white woman talking as honestly as possible about the obstacles and the how to move towards authentic friendship, some of the crucial steps towards moving towards authentic friendship across a difference like race and class. That's my big hope.
I want to say this is such a great conversation, and I'm so glad that we got a chance to have it literally on the day that the book is coming out.
Yes.
Again, everyone, Ms. Wendy Sanford has been our guest. These Walls Between Us is the title of the book, a memoir of friendship across race and class. You all can get it on Amazon right now. You can see it highlighted there in the carousel, the print edition, or you can get the Kindle edition right now. So make sure you guys pick that up. Published by one of my favorite publishers, She Writes Press. I've had a lot of their authors here on our broadcast. And Ms. Sanford, how can they stay connected with you?
Well, I have a website actually, which I could tell you. It's Wendy Sanford, SANFORD hyphen thesewallsbetweenus.com.
All right. So make
That's
sure you
it.
all do visit her online. And Ms. Sanford, thank you so much for your
it's
time and for writing this book. And I look forward to speaking with you again.
it's great talking with you. Thank you.
And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents. Until next time, you all make it a great one. We'll talk soon. Take care.